say to me in Bowers Game
Hey there,
Corner.
YouTube. I'm back again for another How to Play video, and today I'm very excited to teach you how to play Disney Sorcerer's Arena Epic Alliances. Now, this is for 2 or 4 players. It's going to take you 35 minutes to play, and this is an interesting game because the game company recommends that you learn it over the course of 4 chapters, aka 4 separate games. So today, in this video, I'm going to teach you how to play Chapter 1, and you'll learn all the rules how to play Chapter 1, and then in a separate video later on, there'll be a Chapter 2, and then a Chapter 3, and so on and so forth. So right now, we have everything set up for Chapter 1. So let's get to doing that first. So the first thing you're going to want to do is set the board in the middle so that so that both players are on each side of the board. So one player would be over here, one player would be over there. Decide which color you're going to grab, and then you grab these little red rings right here, and you grab your 2 characters. So your choices are, you can either play as Mickey and Aladdin, or you can play as Gaston and Ariel. So right now, we have Gaston and Ariel that are going to be red, and Mickey and Aladdin that are going to be blue. So you grab your little mini standees, and then you're also going to have to grab the bases. Now, how you know if it's your base or not is you can look right there, and it'll have 3 letters. So this is Ariel's base. And you guessed it, Gaston's base will say gas on it. So you're going to assemble your bases. You're going to make sure they are at their maximum health, the most health that they have. And if you ever forget what their maximum health is, it's also going to be on these little tiles right here, which we'll talk about in a second. And then you're going to place them in your front 2 specially marked spots right here. So Gaston and Ariel would start right here, and Mickey and Aladdin would start over here. That's the red player's side, that's the blue player's side. Next, what you're going to want to do is grab these 4 tiles right here, which will have your characters' faces on them, and you're going to want to put them in this exact order. Mickey, Ariel, Aladdin, Gaston. Just for Chapter 1, but you're going to put them in that exact order. Also, you want to make sure that your character's face is looking at you. So since blue is on this side of the board, Mickey and Aladdin are looking at me, and Gaston and Ariel are looking at my opponent. You're also going to want to take this diamond right here and place it onto Mickey's face because Mickey will be the first player, and this just represents who is the active player. This will be moving as you progress through the game. Next, you're going to make sure that each player has one of the player reference cards, the Chapter 1 player reference cards, and also has their 2 characters' cards. So how this works is you're going to grab all your characters' cards, which will have their faces on it, and they're going to shuffle them together. So this is Gaston and Ariel's deck, so I would take all those cards, I'd shuffle them up, and then I'm going to deal 6 cards to myself. Likewise, the other player is going to get all of the Aladdin and Mickey cards, shuffle them up, and deal 6 cards to themselves. Next, you're going to make sure that these Mickey counters are over here on the side, and also these victory point counters are over here on the side where everyone can reach them. And you're going to want these 3 special attributes: Stealthy, Immobilized, and Magic Broom. The rest of the attributes you can put back in the box. And likewise, everything that you don't see out here, you can put back in the box. You will not need it for your Chapter 1 game. Now that we've got our game set up, it's going to be time for the first player to take their turn, and it's going to be Mickey, so the blue player will be going first in this particular instance. Also, to avoid confusion, make sure that your tiles are on the correct color. So Mickey could be red, it's just in this particular instance, we're blue. Now, the first thing you need to know is Mickey is the only character that is active right now. We're not going to be doing anything with Aladdin unless Mickey cards tell us to do it. So, we take a look at our handy-dandy Chapter 1 reference cards, and the first thing we're going to do is check status effects and VP spaces. That doesn't make any sense right now. We'll explain it a little bit later. We'll move on to the next one. Return active KO'd characters to Arena. Once again, we're going to talk about that a little bit later. And so the first one that we're going to do is draw 1 card. So we're going to draw 1 card from our deck. Remember, we have 6 cards in our hand, so we'll put that into our hand. So now we get to the movement and action phases, and you can do this in either order. So let's first talk about the movement phase. And so when you do the movement phase, you get to choose up to one of the 2 options. You can either do standard movement, which just means you move 2 spaces, and yes, you can backtrack if you want to. That's perfectly legal. Or you can play one of your character movement cards. And you'll know it's a character movement card because it will have the green on it. So for instance, this shooting star card, despite the fact it is a Mickey card, I can't play as part of my movement because it doesn't allow movement. However, I do have this card right here, this quick recall, which says I get to move up to 3 spaces. And you know what? I actually think I might do that for this action because moving up to 3 spaces is great because I can go 1, 2, 3, and I can land my Mickey onto one of these victory point spaces. So you'll see on the board, there's 3 gold spaces. If you start your turn on one of these spaces, you're going to gain a victory point, which once again is listed on our chapter reference card. Now, in addition to moving up to 3 spaces, there's also some other text on the bottom of this card. And if I'm able to do these things on the bottom of this card, I have to do them. So it also says return up to 1 card from your discard pile to your hand, but that's really not applicable right now. So I put this card into my discard pile, and my movement phase has been completed. So now that I've done my movement phase, I move on to my action phase. So the first thing I can do is the standard attack, which means I can attack any adjacent character for 2 damage, but no one is there, so obviously I can't do that. However, I still, if I want to, can play 1 active character card from my hand. That means I can play one of the cards that has red on it that is my character. So I couldn't play this one because it's green, and I couldn't play this one because it's Aladdin. Which means I have 2 options here. I can play Shooting Star or Magical Mob. So let's check out the Shooting Star. It says deal 3 damage to an adjacent rival. And unfortunately, that's not really going to help me here because there's no adjacent rivals. However, it does say on the bottom that if Sorcerer Apprentice Mickey has at least 3 total status counters on status effects, Shooting Star has a range of 3. Now that doesn't mean much yet, but we'll come back to that. So I can't play this card right now. However, I also have this Magical Mob card, which means Sorcerer Apprentice Mickey gains 2 Magic Broom. Now, this is what's called a status effect, and these are these right here. So this one's specific to just Mickey. Nobody else can have the Magic Broom. And in fact, I think I will play this Magical Mob card because if I can get enough status effects on this Magic Broom, that's going to help my Shooting Star get better. So I'd play this card into my discard pile, I'd slide this Magic Broom tile right here onto Mickey, and then I'd place 2 counters onto it because it told me Mickey gains 2 Magic Broom. Now there's also an ability on the bottom of this card. So this one says choose up to 1 adjacent rival, deal 1 damage to that rival. So we can stop reading that now. We don't have any adjacent rivals. So that just goes into our discard pile. And Mickey's had a pretty solid turn. So now that he's done his movement phase and his action phase, he would move on down to the next phase, which is discard down to 6 cards. Doesn't have to worry about that. And then end turn, which means the little diamond would now move to the next player. However, I want to spotlight something here that helps emphasize how important it is to read your cards. Because we could do that turn just slightly differently, and I think we're going to do that. So we're actually going to pretend like we played the Magical Mob card first, and then put that here, which means Mickey's still right here. And then we're going to do the Quick Recall card, because it says move up to 3 spaces, and then return up to 1 of this special symbol card from your discard pile to your hand. And sure enough, this Magical Mob card has that symbol on it. And that's why it's important to remember that when you're doing your movement and action phase, you can do it in whatever order you'd like. So Mickey's still right here, and we still have our Magical Broom, but now the Magic Mob card is actually back into our hand. But now it's time for the red player's turn, so we move the gem to Ariel. We're going to skip, once again, the checking status effects and VP spaces, because obviously Ariel is not going to have to deal with any of that, and we're just going to go straight to the draw 1 card. So for Ariel's turn, she's going to use this Swift Seas movement card, which allows her to move up to 4 spaces and go 1, 2, 3, and she'll stop right there. She'll discard that card, and then for her action phase, she'll decide just to use a standard attack. So she'll deal 2 damage to an adjacent character, which means Mickey is now going to go from his maximum health to 8 down to 6, and you just slide that off, click it back on, and now Mickey's at 6 health. Discard down to 6 cards, and then end turn, and now it goes to Aladdin or the blue player. Now, since Aladdin does not have any status effects and is not on a VP space, he doesn't do anything for check status effects and VP spaces. He doesn't return his active KO'd character. He's just going to go straight to draw 1 card. So Aladdin is now going to play his movement phase first, and he's going to decide to play this Blend into the Bazaar. So he's going to move up to 2 spaces, and then he's going to gain Stealthy. So we'll go 1, 2, and then he gains the Stealthy attribute, and he gains 2 Stealthy, which is 2 counters on top of there. Now, I think it's important we stop to talk about what stealthy means and the difference between triggered effects and constant effects. So constant effects will have blue tiles, and these will be things that are just always happening to that character, whereas the orange effects are triggered effects and will only happen during certain circumstances. And this is why we haven't actually talked about Mickey's Magic Broom ability and why we're going to talk about the stealthy ability right now. So what stealthy means is that a rival summoner may only use a direct effect on this character if they first banish a card of their choice from their hand. And when you banish a card, that means you take a card from your hand and it's gone forever. It goes back into the box. Now, this is bad because that's one of the ways that the game end condition can be triggered, but we'll talk a little bit about that later. So, while Aladdin is stealthy, if anyone wants to just punch him in the face with a direct attack, they have to get rid of a card. Now, if they do what's called an indirect attack, then they don't have to get rid of a card. And you'll know if it's a direct attack or an indirect attack by the symbology on the card. So let's take a look at this disarm. It says deal 2 damage to an adjacent rival. This is a direct attack, and it has this little black highlighted on the top and bottom symbol. Now with indirect attacks or indirect effects, it's going to have a different symbol, which is more like this little black dot in the center. But now that Aladdin has blended into the bazaar, he's also going to do the carpet swoop. And this is a special card because it has both the green and red symbol, which means I could play this as either as my movement phase or my action phase. But right now I'm going to play it as my action phase. And it says I can move up to 3 spaces. Aladdin may pass through rivals while moving. Now this is atypical because normally you can only pass through your own players when moving, and you have to go around the opponents. Now this card also has an indirect effect down here, which you see the symbol. It says deal 1 damage to each rival pass through this way. So we actually want to go 1, 2, 3, and we just did 1 damage to Ariel with that indirect attack. Aladdin would discard down to 6 cards, which isn't a problem, and end his turn, and now it moves on to Gaston. He's fine on status effects, his character's not KO'd, so he's just going to draw 1 card, and I think he would move 2 spaces and then use his shove action card, which allows him to deal 3 damage to an adjacent rival. So Aladdin would take 3 damage and go down to 6 health. Oops, quick error. With Aladdin being stealthy, Gaston should have had to discard 1 more card. And then it also says on the bottom, move that rival up to 2 spaces. You may not move this rival through other characters this way. So I think he would shove Aladdin all the way over here so they can team up on Mickey. They're at 6 cards, so they're fine. They don't have to discard any cards. And just like that, the first round is over. So now the gem goes all the way back to the top, and a new round begins. However, had someone triggered one of the 2 endgame conditions, that would have been the final turn, and then the game would be over, and whoever has the most victory points would win the game. But we're going to get into how that works after this round. So Mickey's going to take his turn, and the first thing he's going to do is check status effects and VP spaces. So what checking status effects means is that you're going to take one of the tokens off of each of the status effects that you have out. And if it's an orange one, like the magic broom, something is going to be triggered, is going to happen. So since Mickey has removed a counter from the magic broom, they're going to look at the top 2 cards of their deck. And what they're hoping for is a magic card. Because if they get the magic card, they're going to want to put that back on top. And then they reveal the top card from the deck. And when it says to reveal a card, that means you show it to everybody at the table. Now, since this has the magic effect, that means that Mickey's actually going to get this counter back on his magic broom, and he's going to have that ability for an extra turn. Now, let's pretend that a magic one had not come up, or maybe they didn't want to play a magic one for whatever reason. Instead, they would reveal the other card. They'd show it off to everybody. That one token would not have come back, and then this goes back on the top of their deck. Because either way, whether or not you get the magic symbol or not, that's going to be the card you draw when you get to the draw 1 card phase, but we're not quite there. So we did our check status effect for Mickey, and now we're going to check to see if Mickey's on a VP space. And Mickey is on a victory point space, which means Mickey's summoner is going to gain 1 victory point. And that's one of the 2 ways that you're going to trigger the end of the game. Because if a player ever gets to 12 or more victory points, then that will be the final round. Or if a player ever tries to draw a card from their deck and there's not a card to draw, that round will be the last round as well. So then we move on to the next phase, return active KO'd characters to the arena. We still don't have that. No one's gotten knocked out. So Mickey's now going to draw a card, which in this case we know is going to be that magic card. And now Mickey's going to do the movement phase and action phase. And Mickey is ready to have an awesome turn because Mickey has mystical momentum, which says move up to 2 spaces. So we're just going to go 1, 2, and we'll go right back to our spot. But then Sorcerer's Apprentice Mickey is going to gain 2 more magical broom, which now means we have 4 counters up there. And if Sorcerer Apprentice Mickey has at least 3 total status counters on status effects, you gain an additional movement phase this turn. Now, we're not going to utilize that, but that's still really awesome. So then that card gets discarded, and now we have our action phase still left to do. And we're going to use the magical mob, which says Sorcerer Apprentice Mickey gains 2 magic broom, which now means we're up to 6. And then we get to choose up to 1 adjacent rival and deal 1 damage to that rival for each counter we have on Mickey's magic broom. So we're now going to turn around and do 6 damage to Ariel. Boom! All the way down to 1 health. So Mickey's done with his movement and action phase, has less than 6 cards, his turn is over, and now it's going to be Ariel's chance to respond. So Ariel has no status effects. She's not on a victory point space. She's not KO'd, so she's just going to draw a card. And now what she's going to do is she is right next to Mickey. So I think she would definitely take this opportunity to get off a good shot. And she has the perfect card for this situation. So this is the Courageous Spirit. This is going to be her action phase. It's got a range of 2, which means she could do it anywhere from 2 spaces away from her. And it says choose one. Either deal 3 damage to a rival or discard another action card to deal 3 damage to a rival and their summoner loses 1 victory point. So I think she would most definitely discard that additional action phase card in order to deal 3 damage to Mickey and make the blue summoner lose the victory point they got last turn. That you can never go below 0 victory points. If for some reason you might need to lose a victory point, you don't have one, you just stay at 0. So now both those cards are gone, but now Mickey is sitting at only 3 health. Now Ariel still has her movement phase, and she doesn't actually have a movement phase card, only Gaston does. So she might just move 2 spaces to get as far away as she can, and then she's going to end her turn, which means now it gets to Aladdin's turn. So the first thing is check status phase, so one of these tokens is going to go off of Aladdin, and since there's still at least 1 token on here, Aladdin is still stealthy. However, next turn, if this token goes away, then Aladdin is no longer stealthy, and this would go back over to the general pile. But that's not the case right now. Aladdin's not knocked out, so Aladdin is just going to draw a card and then move to the movement and action phase. And Aladdin would really love to get over here to Ariel because he knows Ariel is super weak, and one of the great ways to get victory points in this game is to knock out your opponents. So now Aladdin's going to try and get as close as he can to Ariel because he knows Ariel has super low health. So I think Aladdin would use their movement phase first and do a standard movement and go 1, 2. And then use the Stun and Run special ability, which once again can be used either on the movement phase or the action phase because it's green and red. And deal 2 damage to 1 adjacent rival, which means Gaston is now going to lose 2 health. But the card also says that rival gains 2 immobilize, which means now Gaston has just been given the immobilize attributes with 2 on there. And this is not good for Gaston because when you're immobilized, you cannot be moved with any card or other effect. Anytime this character would be moved 1 or more spaces, instead they do not move. Also on the bottom of this card it says move up to 1 space, which means Aladdin can now move 1 space closer to Ariel and stop on a victory point spot. This card is now discarded, and Aladdin's going to end his turn, and now it goes to Gaston. So first thing, Gaston loses 1 of his immobilized token because of check status effects and VP spaces. However, since there's still at least 1 on here, he is still immobilized. He's going to draw a card, and then movement action phase. And Gaston, being Gaston, of course, is going to use this card right here, the movement phase card. Remove any status effects of your choice from Gaston. Which means Gaston is no longer immobilized, and he gets to move up to 3 spaces. So I think Gaston would go 1, 2, 3 to get away from Aladdin, but be right next to Mickey. And then for Gaston's action phase, I think he would shove to deal 3 damage to an adjacent rival, which means now Mickey is knocked out because his health has gone below 1. But there's also some text on the bottom of the card that says you can move Mickey, but that's not going to be applicable because as soon as a character goes underneath 1 health, they immediately get knocked out and their piece is removed from the board. What this means, though, is that Gaston is going to score victory points for knocking Mickey out, and how many victory points he'll get is on this token right here. So if you knock out Mickey, you'll get 4 victory points. If you knock out Gaston, you'll get 6 victory points. So the red summoner has now gained 4 victory points. The other rough part for Team Mickey is that all status effects and counters are also removed from that character. And once a character is knocked out, they cannot be affected by direct or indirect effects unless the card specifically says so. So Gaston had a great turn, doesn't have to worry about discarding down to 6 cards, ends his turn, and because we haven't hit either of the end game conditions, it now goes back to Mickey, who is knocked out. He has no status effects. He's not on a VP space because he's not even on the map. However, he now is going to return to the arena with full health. Now, where you can return though is really quite interesting. You can go to any one of the spots with the stars. So either the top 3 spots here or the bottom 3 spots down here. So I think maybe he wants to get his revenge on Gaston, so he's going to come right back down here. Other than that, though, Mickey's turn is going to be pretty normal. He's now going to draw a card and do a movement and action phase, discard down to 6 cards, and end his turn. And this is how the basic flow of Chapter 1 is going to go until either one person gets 12 or more victory points, which means you'll finish out the round, or a summoner needs to draw a card from their deck and there's not a card to draw, which means that will be the last round as well. Once the round is concluded, whoever has the most victory points will be the winner. If there's a tie, it's just a straight tie for Chapter 1. Now, 2 more minor rules that I do want to mention. Friendly fire is turned on, so if some card makes it sound like you would damage your teammate, you damage your teammate. Also, whenever damage would be dealt to 2 or more characters at the same time by a single card or other effect, the player who controls the source of the damage gets to decide the order in which the characters are damaged. Last but not least, 2 characters can never share the same spot. But that's how you're going to play Chapter 1 of Disney's Sorcerer's Arena Epic Alliances. If this helped you out, please consider giving it a thumbs up. And be sure to click on the subscribe button as I teach new games all the time. And I'm going to have Chapter 2 upcoming very, very soon. I'll be sure to post that up in the card and in the description when it goes live. But thanks for your time. Go have some fun, YouTube. This video is brought to you by all of my amazing Patreon supporters. And I would love it if you would join their ranks and have your name immortalized in the end of many of my videos for the end of time. But consider for only $1 a month. And as always, thanks for stopping by.